Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer for this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. Let's have a conversation about Saturn and Pisces stationing direct, which happened, oh, about 4 hours ago, give or take. And in this video, I really want to focus on the archetype of Saturn and Pisces and what this is meaning now that Saturn has stationed direct. So let's pull, I will pull up this chart and let us begin here. I'm kind of stumbling over my words, but I find Saturn really fascinating. I once had my really good colleague, Kristen, who's another amazing evolutionary astrologer, tell me that Saturn is like the bones of the house, right? You can go into any room in your house and let's say it's your Venus room, and the wallpaper and the furnishings in there are all, for me, Venus and Sagittarius dynamics. It looks that way, it feels that way, but if you were to peel back the wallpaper, there would be Saturn, the bones. And I think it's important to understand that Saturn in anyone's natal chart colors every single aspect within it because it is the structure of our consciousness. It is the way in which our consciousness is structured through our conditioning. That is another Saturnian dynamic, is our learned conditioning. And how could that not condition the structure of our consciousness? And so it's really important to think about that whenever you're even looking at your own natal chart and you're wanting to understand, again, for me, my Venus is in Sagittarius, and that can be someone who's highly intuitive, who is needing to understand themselves and expand upon themselves over and over and over again, and is needing to understand their own truths versus beliefs, and is more a person who thinks in concepts instead of in a linear type of way. But what happens when you have, or for me, as an example, have Saturn and Capricorn, as I do? That's also in both of these planets are in the eighth house for me. Well, how is that conditioning that Venus? Well, for a long time, I would suppress my own personal truths, Capricorn, um, as a way to appease the family or society, right? And so for me, constructively working with my Saturn is not suppressing my Venus anymore, meaning that I walk in an authentic way now, whereas I used to not. I used to very much live for other people, meaning I was suppressing my nature, my authenticity. But Saturn, for me in Capricorn, has been about really structuring in a positive way, and not in the non-distorted way, but in the natural expression of Saturn and Capricorn in the eighth for me, is confronting these areas in my life where maybe I've Venus and Sag overcompensated to fit in, or I have suppressed my authenticity out of fear of Capricornian judgment. And for me, consciously working with my Saturn has truly been about confronting eighth house, these areas. And then for me to really structure my life around living authentically and honestly and sincerely within my truth, Venus and Sag. So it's a really interesting concept to look at in your own natal chart. And Saturn will speak to the type of family conditioning that you grew up in. Like for me, Saturn and Capricorn, a very consensus type of family that was very religious and more leaning towards patriarchal values and norms and roles. Um, And for me personally, that just isn't aligned with my authenticity. So it's interesting to look at the natural and the distorted expressions, especially when we're looking at Saturnian conditioning, because it can really help you understand each planet in your chart in a new way because it's a how it is impacting that planet through the structure of your consciousness. So, Saturn in Pisces in transit has been very much this dynamic of a need to, in true Piscean fashion, dissolve old structures in our consciousness in order for the new to emerge. So it's truly about Saturn and Pisces is about deconditioning in order um, to actualize those parts of our soul or the things in our chart that are being reflected in a more natural and timeless way. Okay, that isn't about repression or suppression. Um, And it's allowing the old to kind of melt away in order for the truth of who one is to emerge, right? It's almost like you think of Pisces, it's the cosmic womb. And we've been in this period of being in the cosmic womb. And when Saturn was retrograde, it was a time for deep introspection. And in true Saturnian fashion, a lot of us have been confronted on an internalized level with where voids are in our life. A void is a very Piscean dynamic, and that is usually happening when we are not being able to understand Pisces in its totality, which is being with the timeless and the universal and being with just what is. Pisces, whenever it's a bit distorted, can be where we're having ideal, idyllic aspirations that are actually, there's nothing wrong with that, like having a vision, a dream, right? Um, Pisces. But it's when we're giving something absolute and total meaning outside of ourselves that we run into this Piscean problem. And it's where, when we're confronted with that, we have to face a void of what was there, which is no longer there. I gave ultimate meaning to X, Y, and Z, and I'm realizing that it's not what I thought that it was going to be. And that's whenever we can experience Piscean disillusionment. And that disillusioning feeling can do a few things. It can perpetuate um, an existential void within and an internalized crisis in one's own beliefs, right? But what that helps us do is with it being Saturn, it helps us to start inwardly reflecting on why. So we can look at how we've structured things in order for us to dissolve the old and emerge as a new, coming out of the cosmic womb, um, you know, being more timeless in our authenticity and our authentic nature. So Saturn and Pisces has been where a lot of us have experienced the depression and the futility of realizing that what we gave meaning to really is not what we thought that it was. And it's challenging us to look at, where did that come from? Where did I buy into this notion? Fun fact about me, during my Saturn return, I got married, and I've talked about this a little bit before. And at the time, I was really suppressing who I was. It's like I had been being myself for a long time, and then I had some very traumatizing things happen, and I became very complacent, which can be a Saturn thing where it's a Saturn Virgo thing. You become very complacent, and I was resisting um continuing my evolutionary work for a while. It's like I stayed crystallized in time, which is totally a Saturnian dynamic. And I remember I was working through self-worth issues, Taurus rising here, Libra moon. So I was really starting to live for my family system and their ideals around if you do X, Y, and Z, then this is the American dream. You'll be happy. And so I remember I got married and it was a very disillusioning experience for me, not because of my ex-husband, but because of the system of all of a sudden in true Saturn return way confronting, is this really all there is? Is this the end all be all? You get married and that's it, and you're supposed to live happily ever after. And I was really confronted with my conditioned ideals that marriage actually wasn't in alignment with my own personal values. And so I had to go through this really disillusioning process that actually helped me truly self-reflect and come back to my authentic self. So it's almost, and again, my Saturn's in the eighth house, marriage, right? It was an experience that I needed to go through to help me recover who I was. And I think you guys have heard me say, I'm happy to say me and my ex-husband are really good friends. Um, and he was very understanding whenever I told him, you know, I'm sorry. And that leads me to my next point of Saturn is it's very much about taking accountability and responsibility for the ways that you've played into how you're structuring your own reality and the choices that you make and the judgment calls that you make. So with Saturn retrograde, it's really been this process of, on a collective level, we're having collective disillusionments. Pisces, with the ways in which we've structured society or um, dynamics in general. And so retrogrades are a repeat, redo in order to resolve. And so it's given us this opportunity for us to really go within to accelerate our own evolutionary growth, to throw off um, our our illusions and delusions around the ways in which we structure. Looking at our ideals, our fantasies, are they rooted in truth? The ultimate truth is Pisces, whereas Sag is more of the authentic truth. Um, but it's been helping us collectively challenge the ways in which we've structured things through idyllic expectations and beliefs. And personally, I think we've all been challenged and confronted with where things have come out of balance in regard to those areas. But Saturn is also about having this self-determination to cultivate new habits as a way to structure or restructure in this case. So it's looking at how one wants to structure their life. And if we're wanting to dissolve the old structures within our consciousness, it's not like when we just decide that happens. It takes a conscious effort and Saturnian self-determination to hold oneself accountable and to continue to restructure one's life by getting up every day and implementing new structures so that they can become crystallized. They can form a foundation for one to stand upon. So this whole Saturn retrograde cycle has been about figuring this out and throwing off old beliefs, old ideals, old illusions, delusions, old ways of structuring relationships, old ways of structuring our consciousness. And now that Saturn is stationing direct, or it did station direct this morning, it's about implementing and being self-determined to create those structures. It's where we can also choose to co-create with Source, which is Pisces is Source. If we're wanting new structures of consciousness to form, we have to make sure that we're putting the effort and the work in every day. And it can be habits that are needing to be implemented. Pisces helps us see the vision, the long haul, and Saturn is helping us put it into structured form. Saturn is also correlated to Capricorn. So it is the mountain goat that is wanting to climb. This is more of like the sea goat in this expression, I feel like. But there's this need to continue to really, if we're having a call for evolution on personal levels, it is this need to deeply get in touch with our pure emotion, which is Pisces, in order for that to be a catalyst for us to understand the vision that we seek for ourselves. And then for healing Pisces to occur through this restructuring, we have to put these habits into place and take responsibility and accountability for this restructuring process. And so we are truly in a momentous time on a collective level where you've got to think this is the last time that Saturn is stationing direct with Pluto and Capricorn, being Pluto and Capricorn's ruler. This has been the decimation of old structures that are rooted in more patriarchal, man-made beliefs, philosophies, and values that are wanting to be decimated in order for more natural and timeless and universal principles to be put in place for a restructuring to occur for humanity, for community, and for each one of us individually. And so it's been beckoning us to have a healing of these dynamics and where we've participated in these man-made structures and to go within in order to see the vision for the future for this restructuring to occur. I'm almost flabbergasted whenever I think about how we've chosen to come in at this time and the why. And I often wonder, as we're reincarnating into this, as we've reincarnated into this lifetime, what were our Saturnian roles that we were playing in prior lifetimes that now we're wanting to structure this in a different way? What is the ways in which we can see the long vision and to put it into place to be more natural role models for others within our societies, to help them see that there's an ability for what is more natural and authentic and rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion in these timeless universal principles to be reflected back out into society, to allow others to see that it can be done and that it can be done in love and compassion and faith. The last dynamic that I want to say about Saturn and Pisces is it's really teaching us about surrendering to the actual truth of the reality that we're living in. And it doesn't mean that we surrender and we be lazy and we're just like, oh, this is just, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about this. This is where we get our Capricornian Saturnian toolbox out and we learn how to swim with the current or to go with the flow, but not in a way that creates disillusionment for ourselves. It's about expanding our consciousness through the restructuring of learning how to work with what is. And that is truly surrendering. So I feel like a lot of people, one way that I can explain this is I think a lot of us, we experience the deepest, most intimate parts of ourself, our pure emotion through the counterpoint of relationship. It's also where we often experience disillusionment or are confronted with our idealistic expectations. And when things don't go the way that we want, we try to control, which is a Saturn dynamic. And Saturn and Pisces is beckoning for us to not try to control an outcome, but to surrender to what you're being confronted with and then learning how to work within that as a way to restructure. If you think about it, most of us have learned or been conditioned to try to control outcomes. This isn't working, so what's the next way that I can get this to work? How can I get you to do what I want you to do? How can I? So it's this authoritarian dynamic. And really, Saturn and Pisces is looking at what's actually in front of you and surrendering to that truth, that it is what exactly it is meant to be, and that we aren't trying to control something outside of ourselves or someone. It's more about learning how to work with it and to have acceptance, not in a way that means that we're going to allow things to happen to ourselves and our sovereignty and our own authority, but it's really about being our own authority and allowing others to be who they are in their natural truth as they are in that present moment without trying to control them or even other things. There is a lot of wisdom in Saturn. It's an archetype of Saturn and Capricorn that is wanting to come through our consciousness. But when we're trying to control something, we're not being, that's living in anxiety and fear. And that's whenever we all of a sudden can get um depressed because things aren't going the way that we want them to. And this is really asking for us to have faith and compassion and empathy for what's going on around us, but to be self-determined to do our own work, to take accountability for our own healing, and then to just reflect that out as a natural role model. So for some people, this has been about really dissolving these old ways that they've structured their consciousness where they've given their authority away and they haven't, been in their sovereignty. It's, for others, it's being confronted with all of a sudden realizing that maybe their values don't align with the ways in which that they've structured their life because that was learned and they never questioned it. And so now this is time with Saturn direct, whatever it is, the vision that you see, it is to put it into action through waking up every day and structuring your life in that type of a way, because eventually it will become obtainable. So it's working with the current of what is happening, but being self-determined to do your own work so that the vision can come to fruition. So it's learning about patience, and that sometimes things don't happen like that. Sometimes it means that as we're confronted with little ideals that we're having that maybe we didn't realize we're having to have a co-creative function with source and to trust that how things are unfolding is the way that it's meant to be. And Pisces is a mutable sign. So it's about adaptability. As things come, as you're being swept into the current of the sea or the ocean, when something comes, you're able to work with it instead of against it. And that is how you co-create, is surrendering to this process of the unknown. Pisces is the unknown. It's the unseeable. It can have a vision, but it doesn't necessarily feel tangible yet. And so it's just being self-determined to reach that end goal or to reach that goal, but to also understand that part of this healing process is being able to co-create with source as you're confronted with different dynamics. And so it's taking all you've been learning about since Saturn turned retrograde and now applying it for the long vision and it helps to promote healing and faith and hope. And it helps us to understand how we just have to surrender and not control, but we can work within that structure that we find ourselves and surrender to the truth as it's existing in the here and now. So I wanted to make this video and have this conversation, so hopefully you all understand this a little bit better. I also wanted to say that as Saturn stationed direct, it was square Mercury in Sagittarius. And this is really about utilizing one's intuition to navigate, and it helps to understand the creative principle of what we're in right now as a way to restructure. If you are trusting your intuition, Sag, and learning more about your authenticity, Mercury and Sag, through throwing off the old internalized messages or beliefs that have been conditioned, Jupiter retrograde in Gemini and mutual reception with Mercury and Sag, it really helps to open things up to see more clearer, because sometimes it's hard to see clear with Pisces. So I just wanted to mention that. And yeah, this is what I wanted to say about Saturn stationing direct in Pisces. As many of you know, I am doing a Asteroid Goddess series starting December 7th, and it's a 5-class series every other Saturday at 1 p.m. Central. You can pay a drop-in fee, or you can sign up for the whole class series. You can find that on my website. And Scorpios, you have 5 more days for your birthday special, and then it's going to switch to Sagittarians. If you want to learn more about evolutionary astrology, or you want to become an evolutionary astrologer, I do tutoring sessions. I love teaching. I have Jupiter on my ascendant. So I really love doing that. And I love working with couples and individuals one-on-one. I love working with people for extended periods. If they're really going through something, there's an option for that on my website. And yeah, I hope you all have a happy full moon in Taurus. And I did a video on that. And I just want to leave us with everything that you've been learning since 2008, with Saturn stationing direct, being Pluto and Capricorn's ruler, is really asking for a lot of healing of those dynamics for whatever it is that you've been going through since 2008. It's wrapping up that whole evolutionary cycle from that time point. Excuse me. And that is the nature of Saturn and Pisces, it is wanting to culminate what it is that has been needing to be released since 2008. And there is a surrendering that needs to happen for each one of us. And wherever Saturn and Pisces falls in your chart, and wherever Pluto and Capricorn falls in your chart, and the aspects that each are making really speak to this dynamic. So I hope to see more of you soon. I love connecting with each one of you. I say this every time. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for entrusting me to read your chart. It's an honor to me and a privilege, and I really, really appreciate each one of you who have been a client of mine, or you've been a student. You helped me grow so much as a person. And if I'm able to help just one of you, that's good enough for me. So Anyway, have a beautiful weekend. Happy full moon and Taurus, and happy Saturn stationing direct. Until then, bye bye.